Welcome to your next Python TA training lesson. In this lesson, we'll be covering data types, conditional statements, and print statements, and for loops. Let's try identifying some pieces of data here. What do you see? You see 100, A, fantastic, 10, summer, 30.0. But what if I asked you, okay, how would I differentiate between these data types? You could say that one is a number, while another one is a number with a decimal place. But some numbers you see here, they have actual quotation marks. You can say that these are words or even characters, for example, in A. In Python, we actually have very specific names for these types of data. Let's take a look at some of them. An integer is a whole number, so no decimal places. As you've learned from your grade 8 math class, you can tell that 100 is an integer. Negative 100 will also be an integer, or maybe 12 or negative 12. A float, on the other hand, is a number with a decimal place. If we consider 30.0, that's a perfect example of a float. Negative 30.0 will also be a float as well. What if we have 12.1? That is also a float. Notice here, even though we have 30.0, which is basically 30, Python will still consider this as a float and not an integer. Be very careful of this fact. So anything with a decimal place we can consider a float. Let's try this activity. Try identifying the data below. Pause the video here and give it a shot. 2 will be an integer, 2.0 is a float, 1900 is an integer, 69 is an integer, 69.0 is a float, and 49.2 is a float. And as I've said before, a difference between a float and an integer is just that singular decimal point. Anything with a decimal point, that'll be a float. Anything that doesn't have a decimal point will be an integer. A string is characters or words. So we had summer, fantastic here. That was an example of a string because it was characters. But remember, anything with quotation marks will be classified as a string. Let's take a look at 10 here. If I asked you what is 10, you're going to say 10 is a number. But Python, if we actually have 10 in quotation marks, that's basically a string. So be very careful of that fact as well. Boolean is true or false. We're going to take a look at this later when we talk about conditional statements. Let's write your first line of code with the print statement. Try typing this code into your compiler and see what it gives you. Print hello world. If I run this code, it'll print hello world onto the screen. So run Python file. It simply says hello world on here. Very cool. Try this activity. I want you to print your name, your age, and your school onto the screen. Here's how I would do it. I would print 14, my age, and I would print Daniel, my name. The school I go to is Sentinel. If I run this code, it'll say 14 Daniel and Sentinel. When we're actually printing just numbers, it's okay to type in numbers without the quotation marks. So just 14 like that would also work. Let's take a look at our very first coding concept, which is a variable. A variable is another name for an object or a thing. A score variable is a variable because it keeps track of the score. Let's take a look at the following example. Age is 12 and we print age. Pause the video here and think about what this code will print. On line 1, we actually set up the variable. This is what we call a variable declaration statement. So if I say that age is 12 and I print age, it'll simply print my age, which is 12. If I set that my age is 15, it'll print 15. Why might it be better to set up a variable and then print it though? Because this way we actually know what the number represents. It's okay if I type print 15. This will give us the exact same code. But I don't know what 15 represents here. But by having that age is 15 and then printing age, I know what 15 represents, and that's going to be my age. So always try to use variables to give a data what it actually represents. Pause the video here and give this challenge a try. Create a variable for your favorite food and then print it onto the screen. Here's how I would do it. Favorite food, fave food is pasta. If I print fave food onto the screen, this will print the favorite food of pasta. Notice here how it doesn't print fave food, but rather prints pasta. But if I put fave food around quotation marks like this, what will it print? It will print fave food rather than pasta, because anything we put in quotation marks, it turns into a string. Remember from last video, we talked about input. What if I want to get input from the user? I would simply use the input function. Take a look at this code. Age is input, enter age, and print age. What this code will do is it will ask the user, how old are you, or enter age. And then it will set up a new variable called age, and then we're printing age. Enter age. I am 14 years old, so I press 14, and then I press enter or return on my keyboard. And then it'll simply print 14. Did you see what this code did? It took in the input of age, and then it set up a new variable. So this line can actually be considered a variable declaration statement. So I take in an input of my age, and then I set up a new variable called age. Let's try this challenge. Try creating a calculator that takes in two numbers as inputs, and then return or print their sum and product. Here's how I would do it. Number 1 will represent our first number, and it'll be input, enter first number. The second number, number 2, will be input, enter second number. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to print number 1 times number 2. And I'm going to print number 1 plus number 2. Let's try running this code and see if it works. Enter the first number, 10. Enter the second number, 4. Ooh, we get something called a type error. Notice whenever we take in an input, that's going to be a string. So here, our two numbers are actually string. Remember from this slide, that Python thinks that 10 is a string rather than a number. So we have to explicitly tell Python that the input is going to be an integer or a number. So we can actually wrap it around this int function, which converts our input into an integer or a number. If I run this code, 10 and 3. We print 30 and then 13. Here are the different operators we have in Python: multiplication, division, and modulus. You probably know what multiplication and division are, but not modulus. Take a look at the following example. 4 mod 2 is 0, 6 mod 4 is 2, and 3 mod 2 is 1. This is because when we divide 4 by 2, what is the remainder? The remainder is 0. What if we divide 6 by 4? We can't divide 6 by 4, but if we do divide it, we're going to be getting a remainder of 2. If we divide 3 by 2, we get a remainder of 1. That's what the mod operator does. It finds what the remainder is. As I've talked about this before, what is the difference between 12 and quotation mark 12? This one will be an integer while this one will be a string. Make sure to remember that. Let's find what type or what data type each of the variables are. Let's try typing this code in. Age 1, a new variable, is 12. Age 2 will be 12 in quotation marks. All I'm going to print is the type of age 1, and then I'm going to print the type of age 2. If I run this, you can see that I get int, which is short for integer, and str, which is short for string. Next, let's talk about string concentration. String concentration is a fancy way of saying to add two strings. What is 1 plus 1? 1 plus 1 is 2. But what is 1 plus 1, where 1 and 1 are two strings? Let's print them. So I have 1 plus 1 versus print 1 plus 1. The first one is actually going to be 11, but then the second one is going to be 2. Very surprising, isn't it? When we add two strings, all we're basically doing is we're taking the two strings and then we're just putting them next to each other. This is what we call string concentration. Let's take a look at the following example. Age is 12, and we're going to print my age plus age. Oh no, this also gives a type error. Let's take a look at why this might be the case. When I say that age is 12, this basically, I'm setting up a new variable called age, and age is an integer. But when I print it, I'm trying to add a string and an integer, which is impossible. So what I have to do is I have to convert age into a string. And the way that I can do that is with the str function, which converts a variable into a string. So if I run this, now it says my age is 12. Try running this code. My name is input. What is your name? And then all I'm going to do is print hello plus my name. The first line takes in an input. What will it take in as an input? Your name. And then all I'm going to print is hello. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my name and then just combine them together. When I run this, my name is Daniel, so I type in Daniel and then I press enter. And it'll say, hello Daniel. How do we convert data though? Let's take a look at the following example. On line 1, we set up age as 12, which is a string. And then I'm going to print the type, or what data type age is. But on line 3, I'm going to convert the data type into an integer. When I run this, I see that the first data type is a string because I wrapped 12 around in quotation marks. And then I convert age into an integer by using the int function. And then on line 4, I get that the age is integer. Let's take a look at variable incrementation. Let's say that the cost of fruits is $3 and $4. So the cost of apples, or apple cost, will be $3 and melons will be $4. In order to, let's say that a greedy man comes and increases the price of apples by $2. Then let's see what we get. We can use the plus equal sign to actually increase a variable. So if I run this, I see that apple cost, which was 3, we added on 2 to it, so we get 5 now. Try this question. The original cost of apples is $3. The original cost of melon is $4. You increase the cost of apples by $2, and then you buy 2 apples and 3 melons. How much is it in total? Let's write out the code. So we set up the 2 variables. Apple cost us $3, melon cost us $4. We increase the cost of apples by $2, and all I'm going to print is apple cost times 2 plus melon cost times by 3, which will get us our final answer of 22. So notice here, we have plus equals, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to print apple cost times 2 plus melon cost times 3. How should we decrease the variable though? We do the same thing. We say that apple cost is 3, melon cost is 4, but this time we use minus equals 2. So we print apple cost times 2 plus melon cost times 3 similarly. We can also have times equals, so we're going to be multiplying the apple cost by 2, and we can also have divide equals, which will divide the apple cost by 2. Thank you for listening to this video, and in the next lesson, we'll be covering conditionals and for loops. See you in the next one.